So we're obviously this is a positive for the organization and for the community to be able to go out and ski, and we've been grooming regularly already. All aspects of winter business are happening now. So we have fat bike grooming trails, we have set, everything is happening. So we have quickly ramped up our hub schedule. Thankfully, we have a bunch of staff that are basically they work a little bit when we need them, and then a lot of it when we need them. So I have a lot of gratitude for their flexibility and their dedication, frankly, to the organization, because it takes special people to have an unknown job simply, and so that's a key part of how we are successful. Is that these folks are so dedicated to work for us. Speaking of working for us, we did end up saying goodbye to Amanda very recently. She stayed a little bit extra time and overlapped with her new job to help us transition. She helped with staff training last weekend, and she's helped with some of the interviews with new folks. And we have had a significant amount of applications and some really good folks, and hopefully we're going to make a decision very soon.
Yes.
So not too much of a gap there, and one of our employees, Tammy Jadis, has also stepped in and really been helpful during this transition period. So another big plus for us to have such a great staff. We are still dealing with the insurance issues. Had another meeting yesterday with Eric and David and another David from Land Insurance, the town's insurance person, and a couple board members. And what it has come down to is that the insurance business has really changed in the last 5 years. It's something that I sort of knew based on the changes that have been happening around us, but it was good to hear from somebody who's an insider to say that things are not good, and certainly not good for small organizations. So the challenges are noted now, and we're working with the town to try to separate some of our liabilities and focus on the ones that we are directly responsible for, and then shifting some of that burden to the town, which it's already there too, but
right.
And with the goal that everybody is happy with the level of coverages, and it doesn't kill us as an organization, which is something that we're very concerned about. Our insurance costs last year went up 30% without the increase, simply by asking the question, can we get more? And so if we are to separate out more of the business, such as to take camps out of our general liability policy, we have another potential increase in costs that we may or may not be able to sustain. And just to give a little bit of follow up on the racing that we had to get extra insurance coverage for this year, we ended up making about $5 per person for our series participants for the whole year. So it's not it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you look at it from an economic standpoint. We are definitely providing service to the town to continue and to the community to keep providing these things. So it's a place where we have to really consider what's appropriate, and we certainly do not want to give up this core part of our culture. But between racing, mountain biking in general, camps, these are considered higher risk and therefore higher cost for insurance. So it's unresolved, but I think we've identified some potential where it's full. I don't know if I can say any more without without
No, I
any
think
speculation.
it was a really good conversation. I was also present in the room, observing and participating. And the best part about it was that it was the first time that everyone who had a piece of information was in the same room. The insurance broker for Catamount, who is out there trying to buy insurance and understand, who's willing to sell it and what the problems are. The board and executive director of Catamount, the town manager, assistant town manager, who are, who are doing the risk management for the town, and the town's insurance underwriter, who's advising all of that, including the advice to have a higher level of protection for certain risks. So it was really the first time that all those pieces were together, and I think, as John said, everyone was coming there with the spirit of there's a challenge that faces both of our institutions, and we want to put everything together so we can try to find some creative solutions and work together on it. So it seemed like a really productive conversation from my angle, and I think it'll lead to some new ideas being on the table potentially moving forward, and we'll see. Um, we'll see. The town manager has some decisions to make before tomorrow about kind of what the immediate short-term plan is. And I think we'll be sending a letter outlining that tomorrow.
I was just gonna say that the thing of interest um was the the lease agreement says an acceptable level of insurance, so it leaves it open. So the town is asking for double what the outdoor family center currently had. And this to me was a big insight. The guy from Lamb, was his name David?
Yes.
He said he does all he does nonprofits, like their agency does like all his nonprofits all over the whole country. They're in like the number one nonprofit insurance broker. And his comment was, well, the insurance companies are going to think it weird that such a small entity like Catamount would be asking for coverage that high. And it like raises all these red flags, like, wait, what are they doing? But it's because the town is asking for like if Outdoor Family Center was by itself and didn't have, the rollover liability to the town on land, like they haven't and wouldn't set the um threshold or the whatever the coverage that high. So I just thought that was kind of a neat and interesting insight. Like this will throw red flags for like why does this tiny little nonprofit want such high insurance coverage, which makes it hard to get. So
Right.
I don't know, lots of discussion points. So I
Yeah,
thought that was insightful.
right.
So to continue where we were, the insurance piece is really just a part of sort of a larger picture that has been developing for the staff and board, recognizing the challenges that we have and how we might deal with them. The overlap of public and private land that we're currently working under is a real challenge. The easement that that was initially negotiated when the land was conserved for access to the south side doesn't work. We found out that through the planning process. The permitting costs and the challenges of permitting on the land, I think, were not as well understood at the time either. I say this, and nobody has disagreed with me yet, that we are the hardest, most complicated trail network in the state to permit. Because we are in wetlands, where trails already exist. Not that we built them there, but that's where they are. And that the entire property is on the National Historic Registry. So archaeological review is intense, even in places where there has been extraordinary amounts of impact. So the level of inputs that we've had to put there and that we will continue to have to put there are significantly higher than I think anybody realized. there's certainly language in all of the documents that talk about how, the outdoor fitness center will be responsible for permitting, but not knowing that this was gonna be quite so intense. The other piece, it struck me, and I say this with full respect for the McCulloughs, the business structure that is allowed by the license agreement and manager plan are based on a business plan that has been proven to fail multiple times. So, and we have less access to revenue sources than the McCulloughs did, based on some of the newer restrictions, and so we're really trying to figure out how to change the dynamics enough that we can be self-sustaining. And some of the major things that we've been talking about, we would talk about, for a long time, which is, growing camps, improving the trail network to draw more folks, and having a place where we can host events. The fragility of the current system is pretty extreme. And between the insurance with the town and then the McCullough's personal insurance and our place in their private home and public access across their land, these are all things that could go away very quickly. If we lose the access to the house, we lose the ability to host camps. So when I say it's fragile, I mean that it's as, in my mind, 5 years is the farthest out that we will have access to their house. In the shortest it can be is 2 weeks. And I say that because if their insurance company drops them because of this, which has happened before, and they warned us, we had to be out in 2 weeks. They quickly found another insurance company, but that could happen again. And I don't have a lot of security. I feel like for the organization, based on that experience, that this could be you guys got to get out. And we've talked about it as an organization. What would we do? How would we deal with this? Because we can't just sit back and wait for these things to happen. The office space is not hard to replace. We could all work out in the hub if we have to, but that camp space is vital, and we can't sell camps, and we start selling them pretty soon. And it's really the thing that insulates us from weather, because people buy camps so early, and they're not based around having winter so that you can groom and people can come ski. It's us being there and supporting these camps, which makes them happen. So these are discussions that we've been trying to move forward with the town and with the insurance companies and really trying to figure this all out. But what it has really come down to is that we feel it's important to review the license agreement and how we fit into the management plan, and how we might figure out a better way. So that's a pretty big process. But one that is vital to our existence and to the support and structure that we give to the Catamount community forest, which we feel and which the town currently agrees is important. There's some language in the license agreement that talks about how the town is very happy that they don't have to put in a lot.
What, really?
Yeah, it says this is
Well, that's the taxpayers too, I guess.
no doubt, but
Yeah,
if we go away, then all of the support
Yeah.
that happens for the trail network also goes away, and the town has to figure out how to do
Yeah.
that. And then all these other things like camps and races.
Yeah.
They go away too. So it's a big problem, and certainly one that we have been trying to move forward on in lots of ways, but we do need a lot of help, and certainly ideas are good too. We if anybody I invite you to think about it and brainstorm if you can and talk about it with your friends. It's something that we need to evolve though. The relationship, I believe, was initially put in place to support this conservation, which was a great process, but it really didn't take the whole thing into account and all the pieces and parts.
It's hard to know what those pieces and parts were going to be.
True, I mean, I think that there were some things that maybe could have been worded better in a couple of the documents, but some things can't be changed, especially the easement certainly can't be changed. But yes, we are at a point now in the evolution of the relationship where these things are really apparent now. So we appreciate the town's time and effort with this. But this is kind of
Can I ask, I just have a question, and I'm not sure if it's a John, David, or Andrew question, maybe everybody. Not Andrew because he's gone. Early in some of the discussions, we had talked about the possibility that the rec department would be able to administer some of the things like the camps and the races, but that the outdoor family center could continue to run them and get a portion of the revenue. And I'm just wondering, like, if that idea had been explored more recently, or if not, if it would be worth exploring it. And the example is like the after school at Cochrane's, where it's like a rec department program, all the registration and administration happens on the town website. But then like Cochrane's is running the program and getting actually maybe the registration doesn't happen on the town website. I just registered my kids this year and it was like on the Cochrane's website. But it's a relationship between the town and another local nonprofit. Has that been explored recently?
Not to my knowledge, Kim. There hasn't been any discussion about formal engagement with the recreation department of the town. Obviously, that's occasionally been floated versions of that idea in this space from various people saying, maybe some kind of collaboration could exist. So it's certainly something that could be explored. It sounds like I can speak to what John's talking about really from the town perspective. Everyone is everyone is appreciative who I've talked to at the town, very appreciative of what Catamount does for the community. I think it's a great organization and genuinely wants it to continue existing. And it's not coming from a standpoint for many of the conversations I've heard of we're happy to not have to pay for services, but the town wouldn't be able to provide the services that Catamount provides. If Catamount were to go away, we probably would not have the capacity to run camps. We probably would not have the capacity to maintain the extent of trails that exists and a lot of those things. So it really is a mutual partnership that benefits everyone, and the town is interested in trying to re-examine some of these things. I think, as Danielle pointed out, we're at this place where we can look back and say, right, we can clearly identify right now that there are things about this relationship that need to be re-examined for the benefit of all. I don't know what the circumstance looked like 5 years ago, but from all accounts, the relationship wasn't as strong. Maybe the willingness to re-examine some of those things wasn't the same. But also, I think, as Danielle pointed out, some of these issues, have been kind of back burner issues that we've really come into greater clarity on, more recently. So I think that from everything that I've been involved with, just on the town side, there really is a lot of interest to work with Catamount to kind of say, we inherited a lot of pre-existing things about what the business looked like in terms of what John was explaining, what the circumstances were around the conservation back in 2018. But we don't necessarily have to be beholden to that now in 2025. And if we want to build a more sustainable situation for Catamount, and the town wants to be an active partner in kind of re-examining what things look like. And that includes looking at the license agreement to see if some of these things can be tweaked, particularly with regards to the way that might impact the insurance requirements for Catamount. Looking at the insurance situation and looking at sort of the business strategy side of it as you've brought up. So I felt like there's good buy-in to those conversations from people at all stages in the town right now, and I'm definitely optimistic. I know, all of these issues are pretty, as John has said, the word of the month, existential for Catamount Outdoor Family Center, and I have consistently tried to impress that upon all the different levels of leadership at the town that I've spoken to about these issues, and so I think that has really started to sink in, and there's a willingness to bring some resources to the table from the town to try to help solve these problems too.
Can I say this? I really appreciate, Kim, your brainstorming of what elements can change to like reshape the way things operate to make them more efficient. I think the board has spent some time talking about like all of the critical elements that put together the organization. Like it's a year-round employment organization, and like if you take one little piece out of the Jenga pile, does the whole thing tip over? It could. It's like Jim was constantly experimenting with, oh, we're gonna have a speed skating oval. Like at one point he had motocross, like dirt bikes driving around the property. So like he got to a point where it was what it was, and it's been going, I guess, 10, 15 years as a nonprofit. I don't know. But
20s, 2005.
turn it around. But I will say, we did look 5, 6 years ago about like going onto the registration system with the town. And like Todd had some percentage of the revenue that they would take. And I was like, oh well, we're not exactly in a position to be, we're barely break even. We can't afford to lose some of that. But I do think it's good to brainstorm, and maybe this is like part of the committee's next year if we have like to restructure the license agreement, to brainstorm like the more town people are involved in like what do we love about Catamount, how do we sustain it, how do we get creative with that, rather than just the Outdoor Family Center brainstorming. Like we'll need partners with the town, and maybe this committee is some of that. And other things that have been aspirationally thrown out for many years was, wouldn't it be great to get to a point where mountain biking is free, where you don't charge people for mountain biking? I mean, the Outdoor Family Center is not in a place to do that at this point, but there's a lot of aspirational things that we can work out the puzzle of all the pieces. Maybe there's a future that looks a little bit different, but we can't pull one Jenga piece out and have it tip over. There's like 3 or 4 that you need to get it to balance and not tip over, and be careful with what we change.
The access piece, we as we've been planning our building, Tom Hark from the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps reached out to talk with us and offer his help. He is the one who conserved the monitor barn and had that built too. So just down Richmond. He asked the question, he's like, how come you guys charge for access? You're on town land. And I had to explain to him that this is how it was designed and that this was a way for revenue to come in, but that it is confusing and that we're not necessarily dedicated to that model, but without it, we can't survive right now. And it does feel weird in some ways for us to be charging for access. Winter is maybe a little bit different because people are used to paying for groomed cross-country skiing. But even there, I mean, is it people, there's still people who are kind of angry that we do that. And so while we can't satisfy everybody and there will always be somebody angry, it's inconsistent, and there are people who won't come because of it. And so it's another one of those pieces where it doesn't feel quite finished yet. On our end at least. And then
Just to echo that quickly, did everyone see that Vermont Fish and Wildlife is planning to charge recreational access to some of their maintained land for walkers and birders? And their argument is that anglers and hunters pay to help maintain those areas, which is true, and they want to, through licenses, and they want to collect that from other recreationists. And I totally get it, and I think it's a fine idea, but the backlash has been significant. Their communications person was in my office earlier this week and was just having a terrible day about it. And so I do think that what John is saying is accurate, that there's so many places that you can go and mountain bike that are free access. And so Catamount feels a little weird to folks who haven't thought hard about how the business runs, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just one more thing to read, and then I'll be quiet. I've said enough tonight. But just to give you, this is from the license agreement. A license agreement has been created for the COFC to continue to be the primary managers of the recreational use of the property. This agreement authorizes the COFC to operate the recreational center and maintain the trail network consistent with past practices, so that town residents and visitors may continue to enjoy these recreational amenities with minimal additional resource allocation from the town. There is also convergent language in the license agreement talking about how the town will support the improvement of bridges and other water crossings that we need to have there. So those are expensive, and I would say not minimal. So again, it's another spot where there's a description of how things are supposed to be, and then another spot where it's disagreeing a little bit, and it shows that this was one of the foundational aspects for the town, at least, with how this was envisioned to run, but may not really work that way.
Well, we do have money for those bridges, though.
I know. I'm not saying that we don't. It's just that there's this one sentence that says that the town wants to do not a whole lot, and then another sentence that says the town has to, at the town's expense, maintain these bridges, and we've been doing that. So I'm not putting down anyone here. I'm just saying that there's two sort of divergent directions within the license agreement itself, and that the support for the bridges is in the right direction, and the other one is tougher for us, especially with the costs for permitting, and for building a building, all of which the town will own once done.
Yeah, and just for context, we asked for $6,000 a year, and we only got $5 in the budget, and that's not even solid. So let's just say context is there. It's going to be a tough hill to climb to get money out of the town.
I'll also say, I think some of that language might be like around the town not wanting to put in additional resources. I don't know if this is true, but it might be a relic of us trying to convince people that we weren't spending a ton of taxpayer dollars on this acquisition of this property. Like, there was a lot of messaging around that at the time of the conservation, and I wonder if it just kind of hung around in like the more recent iterations of these documents.
You talked about the comment about minimal support.
Yeah. Like, it's not like people were really concerned at the time, like, oh, the town's going to end up spending so much money on maintaining this. And we did a lot of like open houses and messaging around like, no, really, that's not going to be the case. Please still support the project. And so I wonder if it's just kind of like a relic of that.
I mean, I want to respect that too. I don't think that, if it was sold one way and then we're going to change it, and spend a bunch of money there, I think that would be a little disingenuous, but I do think
Well,
that.
I'm speculating, so
Yeah.
don't make any decisions based on.
No, but I mean, like I think that the goal of the Outdoor Family Center being there and being the primary maintainer and supporter of the trail network is a very valid goal and certainly something that we're more efficient at than the town can be. But how we manage our revenue to be self-sustaining is I think the real challenge. And that includes all the other things that we've already talked about.
And I'm just gonna jump in and say that we're 10 minutes after discussing the long-term trajectory and structure of the committee, which feels a little bit, secondary to, maybe not, that's just to me. About the relationship with the outdoor family, like we're talking about the existence of the outdoor family center, as well as the committee. Should we jump into Kim's presentation? Should we rejigger our timing so that Jean can be here? I think she had to leave at 6:30 if she wants to be in for the was there more budget, or does she have a it's the
Kim's presentation to kick off the conversation. What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think it's a very important conversation to have. I think some of the components of this conversation are more operational. Like they're going to be conversations between like the town manager's office and Catamount. But many, like John said, these conversations absolutely can and should also happen in this space. It's important that lots of voices are included and if there's going to be some revisioning. But I think just in time, I think you're absolutely right. So let's jump in. So
I would put on an agenda a time for the brainstorming, but not do the brainstorming before we've had the presentation from
Yeah.
Kim.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I think they're interwoven, and I can maybe just highlight where I see some of the conversation around like the committee, like I don't know, intersecting with what we've all just talked about.
So one thing I want to put it actually to Jean because Jean has to drop off at 6:30. Jean, would you like an opportunity to kind of present some thoughts about like kind of what you want to float on the table about the long-term trajectory before we jump into Kim's presentation? Because I imagine Kim's presentation is probably going to be about 15 minutes or so. So it might take us right to 6:30. So I just wanted to see, do you want an opportunity to make any comments or put any ideas on the table before we jump into that?
No, I think we can go ahead with Kim's. Someone's going to text me from my other board meeting when I need to be on. So
Sounds good.
I'd have a little more time than I thought.
Are you sure? Because
Yep.
I think even if you do, then I can like talk about it as an example.
Well, okay, because you missed the last meeting. My general comment was that I have a wondering about sort of Friends of the Forest kind of activities that we are involved in versus policy decisions that we are involved in. Like one day we're talking about existential, crisis, and the next we're talking about porta potties. So that's sort of where I was wondering if that's really a 2 organization thing rather than a 1. But that's as far as I got because I didn't want to prejudice my own thinking before I saw what you had to offer.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Actually, I think that's a central question, and it is relevant to what I'm going to say. So some of you you've seen some of these versions of some of these slides because I did sort of a similar presentation when we talked just about having a governance memo, but I updated them for this and added some other examples. And so I'll just reiterate my apology. I'm sorry that I'm giving you a PowerPoint. I'm sorry that it's academic. This is what I do for work. I don't know how to not do it. Please love me anyway. Just a reminder that forest governance, or like the idea of even, I think, how the Catamount Outdoor Family Center works as an organization is connected to this idea of forest governance, but how municipalities, federal government, state governments own big parcels of forested land and then like provision goods and services to the general public from those big parcels of land is something that like lots of people have been studying for a long time. And so we're lucky, I think, in that We know what makes that work well. And we have lots of examples of it not working well, and we sort of know how it falls apart. And there's kind of like a couple key elements. And the first one is actually what Jean just said. Like, is the governance structure itself actually like relevant to the needs of the forest and the community and any organizations that might be operating on it? So the other, like the example that's like the most similar to Catamount that's on the top of my head right now is like national parks often have for-profit and nonprofit organizations that operate on like 99-year leases on federal land. Is the governance structure that manages all of that like meeting the needs of all of those players, and is it at the appropriate scale? And I think like what Jean is suggesting is like perhaps our scale is off, right? Like perhaps sometimes we're handling issues that like don't need to be the purview of this committee, and John could just make a call. So that's something that I think that we should talk about. And then the other things is that like whatever you figure out as a governance structure, like once it's appropriate and you've scaled it, it's got to be clear and transparent. Everybody's got to understand how it works. And I think that's a thing that we can deal with through this idea of a memo, right? Or an organizational chart, or however we want to call that document. And then the other thing is like you have to plan for the eventuality of turnover. When we see this, like people overlook this at all levels of governance. The Forest Service is infamous for detailing people as soon as they have built relationships, and then that turnover is crippling for people's livelihoods in the case of huge national forests where people are getting like timber revenue, and it can mess up other stuff as well. So those are kind of like the three big things. Like, is the structure, does it make sense? Is it clear and transparent to everybody? And then do we have a plan for turnover? Next slide, please. And then I'll just say like real quick, I think we should not overlook trust. This is a funny thing to say, but this is my thing. And people tend to be like, yeah, trust, fluffy, whatever. But actually it can like really make or break a lot of relationships. And so I think really thinking carefully about like, all right, so if that was the first meeting where everybody was in the room around the insurance thing, and that felt like a step in the right direction and felt like maybe it was trust building, I don't know if it was, then how can we build in more opportunities like that to make sure that we're like keeping the trust between all of the parties like really healthy? Because it's a challenging situation as it is, and then if people are skeptical about other people's motives or whatever, it's just gonna make everything a lot harder. So whatever structure we land on needs to keep that in mind. Next slide.
And you're talking, I was trying to figure out if that was like your resume and we're to trust you. Is that what you're saying? Or you were saying that?
Yes, yeah. That is like, I'm
trying
trying to be like, yes, that's me. And I've written about this a lot. And so you have to believe me that trust is important.
So we trust you because you've written about trust a lot. So you're an expert in trust. So we do trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, no, you can decide. Actually, the most powerful form of trust is affinitive. It's not based on things like, oh, you've written about it a lot. It's based on like, oh, our kids play soccer together.
I see. Oh, that's insightful. Thank you.
Yeah. But most people won't admit that. You kind of have to like, it's actually kind of tricky to study it because it's very embarrassing to say, I trust that person because they're also wearing a Patagonia hoodie. But that's actually how human brains work. Okay. And so I just want to say, like, forest governance happens a lot of different ways. So this is one example from Washington State that's even more complicated than Catamount because it's like tribal land and federal land and state DNR and the Nature Conservancy, and it's very hierarchical. And just a note that like communities structure these relationships like many different ways, and I don't think that there's like a right answer. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there is a common way that it happens in Vermont. It might be two slides. There might be a slide first where I'm like, community forests are very common in Vermont.
I'm just noting, so the structure example here is executive committee, and then below that, membership.
Yeah, and that's like 30 people who are just interested,
Okay. And
or like their
then,
jobs are connected. And then they have these like ad hoc committees. So if like the Forest Service, for example, would change like, I don't know, the size of logs coming off the Wenatchee, then maybe they needed to have like an emergent subcommittee that dealt with how that was going to impact intertribal timber council and any mills in the area. So like if an issue came up that someone needed to work on for 6 months, they needed to work on it
yeah,
for 6 months, they would put together these ad hoc committees.
got it. So the membership that's more like a stakeholder group, like
Yep.
people. Right, okay, yeah, got it.
Yep. Yeah, so these are like, this one's very complicated. Vermont has a lot of town forests. I think we're like at like 234 right now. Um, this map is, kind of outdated. There's a master's student who just finished that's producing a new map. But the point of the slide is really like we have a lot of examples of how town forest governance works in Vermont. And this one is a little bit weird and different because it has a nonprofit that exists on it. But we can, I think, still learn from what other town forests do. And we're not the only town forest that has, like Berrytown has a pretty extensive trail network on their town forest. And it's not apples to apples, but I do think that there is some learning that can happen. And so if you go to the next slide, we sent a survey to all of the towns that own town forests, and we didn't get responses from everybody, but we did get responses from 111. So, like somewhere like around a little bit more than half. And we do have an idea of like how those organizations or how those sort of governance structures are happening, and you can see like a lot of them are being it is the purview of the conservation commission in that town. I'm not saying that's the right idea for us. I'm not suggesting we dissolve our committee and move to a conservation commission model. I'm just saying like that happens a lot in Vermont. um
You know,
um
some of those might just be a forest, right? With no
Many of them, yeah,
recreation.
many of them have no programming happening. And I'll say, like, there are towns that we sent this survey to, and they were like, we don't have a ton forest. And we were like,
Let's see.
you do. Would you like me? And they were like, oh, huh. So, like, yeah, there's a huge range in town forests and what happens on town forests in Vermont. And in many ways, I really think Catamount is more similar to the way national parks have, like, the federal government owns a chunk of land and then other organizations run services. Um, so like many campgrounds, for example, at national parks, especially the ones that have like more amenities like bathrooms and showers, they tend to be run by outside organizations. Um, on like often a 99-year lease. But I do think this is useful to look at. Like, okay, we're not totally alone, and we can think about what's happening on these other town forests and who's governing them.
Can I, uh,
And yeah,
can I ask on the, so I think the Catamount Community Forest is probably pretty unique and not like the majority of the other forests. So the majority of the other
for
forests
sure.
probably are the big bars in the Pareto. So I get real interested on the smaller bars here. Recreation Committee, because honestly, do I think of Catamount as a forest? Or do I think of it as a recreation area? Like there's the Williston, what's it called? Like behind the Williston Central School. What's that called? The
Village Community Park.
Village Community Park. Like I
Yeah.
think of Catamount more like that than I think of it like a forest in the Pacific Northwest. So like I'm curious. So I guess my question is just
Or even like find a different park in Williston.
yeah, it's much different than Mud Pond. Mud Pond's not like a recreation center. It's maybe a forest. So I'm really interested, like on those 6 examples, if there's deep dive on those recreation committees, like what are those forests like? Are they more like Williston Town Park Recreation Center with frisbee golf and fields and do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I without having, I'm not looking at that data. I can look at what towns those are and try to answer that question. I do think that um, recreation is growing as like a primary or at least like a high on the management priority list in areas that I would have previously, like in 10 years ago, called multi-use forests. And so I would be curious to see if any of those are newly acquired town forests, because Vermont continues to acquire. There are like 4 new ones even since Catamount was conserved. And I think that like thinking about forests as primarily places that provision recreation services is that's something that I hear more than I ever did in the past. So I'm kind of guessing at answering your question, but I wouldn't be surprised if those were newer town forests. That's what I'm saying. I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that.
It would be great to learn which 6 they are, and then we could,
Yeah, I mean, I can look.
Yeah.
I can totally look.
I guess I would say that the town forest committee is interesting to me because we are a like what do the other forest committees do?
Oh yeah.
Well, some of them fight.
You must have had existential too.
Right? So maybe they wrote a pamphlet already and we can just see what they're up to.
Well, Heinsberg's one, we know that.
Yeah, Richmond has a town forest committee.
Oh my gosh, not that one. That is no. Sorry, I said that in public meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of variability. I think a lot of the ones that, so one of the things is that if you got funding from the Forest Service Community Forest Program to conserve your town forest, there was probably an indirect incentive to form a town forest committee, and I feel that it's the reason that we have one and that Richmond has one. We both got those pots of money, and there was this requirement to do this process around kind of like, I don't know, it felt very much in the same tradition as some of the other grant programs that I have studied that are about collaborative forestry in the Intermountain West, they're very like, please involve the public in every stage of writing the management plan and as a requirement of the grant, which is great and it has a lot of value, but it does incentivize like, okay, well, we're going to create a committee to do that work, right? So again, this is like I don't know the answer to why those stand alone, but we are one of those examples. Richmond is one of those examples. We both got money from U.S. Forest Service Community Forestry Fund, and both of us made a decision that we made because we had to satisfy a grant requirement around a collaborative management plan. So that's possible. Again, I'm guessing. I can look at what those forests are too. I just think this is helpful to look at, to be like, there are a lot of different ways that we can structure the relationship. And I think like if you advance one more slide, it will tie back to what I said at the beginning, which is like, what do we really need at this point? And like, that's partially a question for John in my mind. Like, John, what do you need from us? Like, when do you need advice and help? And when are you like, I really just want to make this decision on my own? And I'm going to them because I think maybe I have to. And we're like, well, we're giving you advice because we feel like we have to, but it's not a clearly defined, it's not a clearly defined thing that we need to do. Maybe we draw some lines around what Jean suggested at the beginning of this. And well, honestly, I think that's a great suggestion of like, let's focus on policy and not on like kind of the banal running of not banal, it's important, but like the like day-to-day running, and like empower John to make those decisions and use his expertise. I also, so I think we should think about like, are we over structured, or maybe we're under structured and I'm totally missing it, but I think I'm in agreement with Jean on this. I think we should consider a governance memo, like I suggested or presented these slides on, rather, like when I was in BC. because I think that like the more clarity you can have, a thing that does create trust is transparency and clarity. And I really think trust is critical, especially in like kind of complicated relationships like this. Um, and so I think like laying it all out there, like this is who's responsible for what. This is how this person is reporting to this person. It's going to happen quarterly. John's coming in and he's giving us updates quarterly instead of once a month, like whatever it's going to be. Um, I think it should be really clearly delineated. Um, and then I think one of the things that should be in that is like steps to deal with turnover, because I've really seen turnover, or like people do a lot of work to clarify things and build trusting relationships and make a structure that is appropriate to the needs of the forest. And then it's built on relationships and people inevitably leave. And that it can be very disruptive to an operation running smoothly. So those are like, if I put on my, I'm sorry to be a pretentious academic, I've studied this for a long time, here are my 3 recommendations hat. These are my 3 recommendations.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Say again, WVPD, WCC. What are those acronyms?
Winooski Valley Park District.
And
Yeah.
Williston Conservation Commission. Is that right with WCC?
Yeah. And here's another paper to convince you to trust me about turnover.
Yeah. And the turnover is of like anybody, like the committee.
Yeah, it's really anybody. I mean, like, I think like the classic thing is like the Forest Service rotates people intentionally, because when it was founded, Gifford Pinchot was really afraid that people were going to become embedded in communities and then they'd be swayed by the people around their community, their neighbors, go figure. And he didn't want that. And so I've just seen so many times that because they actually have this policy, it's very disruptive, but it can be anybody. Like it, like I'm sure John is feeling this right now with Amanda's loss, that like there's all this stuff that like is gonna, that she was doing, and it's gonna take a lot to replace her and to onboard somebody new. And there's all these relationships that she had established, and it just can be very disruptive if there's like something that's very complicated, like a relationship between a nonprofit that's existing on town land and like somebody in the town's office, and people have an agreement, and then like that person gets a new job. It can just really mess things up.
Gene, were you?
Point out David's job.
Right, and the county forest.
Yeah, exactly. The county forest, or any, like, probably the members of this committee are less germane, but like there's a lot of people who are involved in the governance of this place.
Yeah. Gene, were you going to jump in?
I guess just some thoughts. I mean, we'll think about this a little bit longer, but one thought is, maybe as opposed to turning everything over to John, no offense, John, but especially if it's money related, it's going to have to go through staff, but I don't know it needs to come to the committee, or at least not constantly. Some of the uses that we've talked about, like, is it appropriate to do drones or whatever? That probably, I could see that still being something that the committee should look at, but maybe there's some staff work that could go first before we have to spend, 2 meetings talking about something that doesn't materialize. So that's kind of, I think, what you're talking about, Kim, as far as having a document. It's like, these things belong to John, these things are delegated to staff, these things are the purview of the committee. And I mean, frankly, the purview of the committee right now is there a business plan? Is there a business model that's going to succeed? And if there isn't, what does that mean for the town, right?
Yep.
So those are the kind of things that the committee should be working on. But there's also other sorts of other things, right? There's a lot of people who love that forest, and they love the bird boxes, and they love what they're doing. And how do we keep them involved if we kind of bring this committee to a policy level? I haven't quite crossed that bridge yet. That might be something we have to outreach to the people who are interested.
Thank you, Gene. I think I just want to echo on your last point. Right. What about all the sort of more like friends of the forest kind of committees. 'Cause I know, for example, like Terry Marin, who used to be on the committee, was in and still participates a lot, watches all of the meetings and sends notes and opinions and ideas to me very often. Was saying that one way the committee could go that she'd like to see is a committee that does more, like provides more opportunities and educational events and like interface with these different volunteer education programs that exist, like Nest Watch and stuff. So there are different ways of engaging that this committee could go, and right, and maybe as kind of came out of Kim's presentation of your comment, like maybe there's a separation between this sort of like executive committee sort of decision-making body versus a more loose association of people who are interested stakeholders who want to help create, or participate in helping to create opportunities at the forest.
What about Drew? Does Drew want to have a chance to share thoughts?
I guess I'm just looking at the three steps that Kim has presented, and from my former profession in conservation, these look like things that a consultant would come in and discuss with the various different stakeholders here about what their needs are, and then come up with perhaps a proposal on how to move forward. And I'm just curious. I mean, I'm sure we don't have money in our budget for hiring a consultant to do this, but is there perhaps somebody, a student, a grad student, or a PhD student who might be interested in coming in and sort of exploring some of these things with us to come up with a way to move forward? Or is it best that we have these conversations internally amongst ourselves to come up with a plan?
Drew, I was going to say I'm a little too close to it, but the graduate program that I was in, the field naturalist program at the University of Vermont, is a 2 years master's program that puts their master's students in exactly those kinds of situations. And what essentially replaces their thesis is a direct hire, but heavily subsidized. I think it's like $6,000 total. And the master's student goes out and does a very large project that is worth more than that. For example, when I did my project, I did something very similar, working under Stowe Land Trust, but acting as a third party consultant was a part of my project for a similarly complicated parcel of land that was under the ownership of Trapp Family Lodge in Stowe, that has independent mountain biking organization, land trust that's interested in wildlife conservation, logging, maple sugaring, and all of these different kinds of things. So there definitely is that kind of possibility of partnering with UVM on a program like that, or partnering with an institution where you're still going to get consultant quality work, but from someone who's maybe not a career consultant for cheaper. So since you mentioned that, I may as well put it out there.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. Like I was gonna say, like maybe there's an accelerated master's student in Rubenstein that would, like, I know we have a new group of them starting, but I actually think that program is much better. I think that would be an awesome fit. I don't know if would you feel comfortable emailing Walt, or do you want me to ask him if there might be a possibility? Do we want to talk about it more as a committee, or like have him come in and talk about the program?
Anyway, I'm absolutely happy to be that liaison. I just want to make sure that I'm not that if I was to make that overture, I wouldn't be acting out of personal interest, and I'd be representing the interests of the group. So there's no ethical concern. But I do think from what Drew was describing, if that's the direction you want to go, it would be a great fit, and I'd be happy to make that connection with you, Kim.
Is there a timeline on how quickly we need to answer these questions and move forward? And would it be conducive, I guess, to having a student come in and work with us? Or would it take a student a year or two to come up with something?
Right, that's a fair question, Drew. You know, I think if we looked at doing that kind of model, what is it? It's spring now, so we'd be looking to form a relationship in, the start of a year. It'd be the fall of an academic year. So this coming fall, we could potentially like form that relationship, and then I'm guessing with even whether if we went with that program or another program like Kim was saying, an accelerated master's or something, it would still probably be a similar schedule where it would take us until probably spring, the next spring to start work. So, we couldn't, for example, just find somebody who could start this summer. So that timeline thing is definitely a constraint there.
I
It-
can get details about the timeline of the accelerated master's program. It might be shorter, but I really think that the do you still say FNEP or is it just field naturalist?
Yeah, field
Yeah.
naturalist.
Um, I really think the field naturalist program is a better fit just in terms of like quality of product at the end and like what the program focuses on.
And I guess, we also need to consider, do we already have the resources internally that we need to do this at a faster pace? I mean, we don't necessarily need to outsource this to somebody. We can
Yeah,
Right.
renovate.
Like a
Right.
former field naturalist that's already employed with the
Yeah.
town. Yeah,
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's a capacity thing, really. It is just what it is. Um, I think, yeah, that's another great point, Drew. And my take on that is, well, we have a professor of this. We have,
Right.
I have experience in this. We have some amazing people in the room who could offer that, but it's really just a question of how quickly do we need to move and what's everyone's capacity. So that's the benefit of being able to bring in somebody
Is there any?
else. But
I don't want to disrupt the flow of coming to a decision here, but is there anything incremental? Like I liked what Jean said about, or was it Kim? Like, let's not talk about porta potties. Like, either we're gonna have a meeting next month, or we'll skip it and go to every 2 months. I mean, we can do whatever we want. Like, do you want to go to bi-monthly? Do we want to make a few like, hey, let's vow to not talk porta potties? Like, is there something incremental?
Well, I guess I have a suggestion in here that is like it's maybe like incremental towards step one. And I wrote this in an email, which is just to really hit home how much of an academic I am. I wanted to give you all homework. I think it would be great if we all thought about like what are the needs, right? Like, and I really think this is a big question for John, but also maybe for everybody of like, what need is the committee serving? And like, what are the big things that you felt like you weighed in on in like the last 12 months? And if I feel like if we could discuss what those things are, that might give us a sense of like, where are we actually needed and when are we, maybe um I don't know, spending time on stuff that like doesn't that we don't need to spend time on. And David, it would be so good to be like, well, Catamount committee should really have weighed in on blah blah blah, but they only meet once a month. Like you probably have a bird's eye view of all the things that like we could be weighing in on, needs that we could be meeting, but we don't even know about it because it's just not, we just don't have the time. And maybe that is like the Friends of the Forest groups or whatever. But I sort of think that it would be good for us all to individually be like, what actually are the needs? And then have a time where we like, at maybe a meeting, the next meeting where we talk about like, well, what do we actually need to do to meet those needs? And maybe it is Jane's, like we go down to quarterly and we delineate like policy discussion versus day-to-day maintenance or whatever.
I would also say the needs, also think about the stakeholders that have the needs. So like, I think of this committee as Like if a townsperson ever says like, what's going on over there at Catamount? Don't we have a say? My answer would be, well, yeah, committee is the voice of the townspeople. That to make recommendations to the select board to move, to move in the direction of what the townspeople are interested in. Within the confines or construct that exists today of all the documents.
Yeah.
You can't just decide to do whatever there, but so I think
No.
there's the town people, the select board, the outdoor family center. So like, are those the three? Who should we be thinking about for like, who has the needs? Are those the three main constituents, I guess? Where like I don't
You're getting you're getting your homework done right now.
well, I need a framework to like think about it, right?
Mhm.
Like the needs of who? The needs of the town people. I mean, I think the town people have needs to know that their forest, that they have a voice in their forest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point, Hans. I do see that as kind of like a critical function of the committee, at least in its present form, is you have, a father and son from the town who want to propose something brand new at the committee that no one's ever thought of before, or to the forest and no one's ever thought of before. Right now, the committee is the place that they can go and do that. They can make that public comment. They can propose that they want to put a geocache, and that can be figured out. Um, and which leads into the second, like currently indispensable component of the committee, which is that you oversee that community forestry plan that Kim was mentioning that's required for this place, and do the update every 10 years, including the public management. And that's coming up. So, it could be that maybe, right, you move in the direction of like that is the primary function of the committee, and you meet quarterly, but you're meeting to start the work of updating that plan, and doing the public engagement piece that is a part of that.
I'm going to have to drop off, but I think this is going exactly the right direction. I love Kim's idea about like, let's just all kind of brainstorm what things need to be taken care of and maybe where they should be. Then we can talk about where they should be taken care of. That's a great idea. So I appreciate the committee's openness to consider a change.
Let's spend a good chunk of time on what we think the needs are and how do we meet them, and what's the timeline for next month. So we're gonna get our homework assignment sent to us.
Okay.
I'm
Want me to
sorry.
summarize? Is that for everyone?
There's nothing going on in the next 3 weeks, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Or we have 20 minutes where we can think about, we can like have thought about it between now and then we can have our.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing is like we could just it doesn't have to be homework. We can do it as a group, like collectively. If we just like plan on it, right, and think about it
right
between now and then. And I like truly, I know this is the third time that I've said this, but like I really feel, John, like you're integral to that conversation. Like I am so curious to know, like, did you want to come to us about the porta potties, or were you like, I know, I wish I didn't have to do, are there things like that where you're like, I wish I could just make this decision?
Well, I don't get to make a decision about the porta potties. Us, we have to have, we don't have a choice there. And I think when we brought it to the committee, it was more like, hey, here's one of the things that we spend money on that is kind of getting abused and doesn't feel like it should necessarily be fully on our shoulders. It kind of fits in with the larger discussion that we were in before about whose responsibility is what, and how do we make this so that it is equitable and makes sense. I don't want to bring porta potties to this.
I mean, you could make argument.
Right,
and
that's
I
just the
would-
detail of the.
You could make argument that was a
hardline.
policy question, right? Like, what's the policy?
Yeah, that one might, that's about, because it has money connected to it. So like, forget that example, but like, are there other things that you're like, I guess I'm reporting this to you all or asking you all about it because I feel like maybe I have to, but like, it would be great to know if there are things that you feel unclear about or things that you're like, I would like to just handle this, because
maybe that's when you can
Yeah.
answer next month, because or should we check in on the other things we have?
Annual
The 10
report you're
minutes.
talking about?
Yeah,
Or
are we good?
no, that's fine. Danielle is doing the difficult job of chairing this meeting. and trying to keep us on
That's
task,
great, Joe.
which is, yeah.
Can I just tell you all quickly that my
Yes.
number one teaching review comment is Dr. Coleman tries to put too much information into a 50-minute lecture.
Nice. Thank you for that, Danielle. So I'm just repeating what I heard back, which I think is the right direction. Danielle has been encouraging that everyone does some homework on this, which is this brainstorming and visioning on what these needs are. And that's listing out all of the needs of the forest and the forest stakeholders. And then our task will be to come back together and say, where do each of these needs get taken care of? And which of those needs gets taken care of in the committee? Which of those needs can be addressed by staff, by a Friends of the Forest group, by whatever it might be. That sound right?
There's didn't we do a memo about this already?
There's been lots of talk about making a governance memo.
I feel like we hashed out who does what. Maybe like a year and a half or so ago. And
I feel like 6 months ago we had a conversation about it and somebody made a draft. I think it was Andrew, and maybe John, you also made one with the board. So, but I don't know if they were combined and vetted and finalized.
There's your turnover.
right.
Yep. See, I'm telling you, you got to plan for it.
So
Yeah.
it might be something that we could dig up somehow.
I did, let's see. Oh, yes, I did find this memo from, so there was a memo that was related to this. It doesn't say who does what, but it was kind of like, what are all the things that happen at Catamount? It was an Andrew memo. Here it is. I attached it to the agenda and all this. This was 2024, a review. Oh, it's not, screen share is not working. Oh, screen share is working, but I have PowerPoint in the background. Sorry. That's why. So let me share that one more time. Here's the memo. Okay. Great. I don't know what's happening with this, with that. Awesome. No, well. Oh, this is functioning as a separate screen now. I don't know.
I can see it for whatever.
Yeah, you can
that is
see
worth.
it, but Danielle can't.
Oh well.
That's
Oh.
the challenge of it. Yeah, you can't see it either.
Snow.
No, skis.
Okay, let me. Kim, can you still see it?
Yeah, you want me to read it? I can read it.
You're seeing this, the memo?
Now I see Town of Williston. Now I see
Okay,
something else
shoot,
there.
this is so annoying. I can't make everyone see it at the same time.
Well, I think the takeaway, you could send it out. I think the takeaway is that we started on this, but because turnover is so dang disruptive. So I do think like it could be something that we pick up and continue, and
Yeah.
it could include
Okay,
like
well-
yeah.
Right. Okay.
There's just a thing. I think that's the example.
Okay,
We don't-
there we.
Yeah.
All right.
It exists. A start exists.
Yes. It is here. Oh my God. What a night for technology. Okay. Anyways, there's this memo. I attached it to the agenda. It's on the website. You can all read it. Maybe this is what you're referring to. It's an Andrew memo, and it lists a whole bunch of things that, these are things that happen at Catamount.
And John, am I right in remembering that you separately made like an org chart that was like, not an org chart because not an organization, but like
I don't
like
remember
a
doing
like
that.
a tree, like a tree of
See a diagram.
Who
of
does
the
what?
Documents tied
Oh, okay,
together.
yes, I've done that, yes.
Like, have
so there's like the beginnings of it, right? Like there's like the early components that I think we could as a committee flesh out. I just think we shouldn't do that until we're like, these are the needs and these are how we're going to meet the needs. And that includes like the earlier discussion of like the viability, right?
Excuse me.
I'm gonna have to go shortly.
Danielle tried to keep us on track, but it's okay. We're a runaway
Well, we
train.
didn't cover anything else.
Do we have, what about the?
All right, so the last thing was the annual report.
Wasn't Hans volunteered to do that when he wasn't here?
Yes, Hansi. Well, he did, but then Drew stepped in. Thank you, Drew. And Drew put together a first draft of what that could look like. If you didn't get a chance to look at that in example, it highlighted a bunch of things that happened throughout the year. I think there are 5 or 6 different things. And then in addition to that, there was a question about, I believe my understanding is that these are supposed to be kind of one-page summaries, although in the past they were a little more narrative and longer and might have contained pictures and stuff. But there was a question of can there be any room left in this particular report for also mentioning some of the other activities that happen there, including Nest Watch and the Bobolink monitoring. And Terry provided a paragraph, an example paragraph about the bobolink monitoring, and one of the Nest Watch volunteers wrote an amazing report about what they did, but you won't be able to synthesize that whole report. So there's resources that I put online to take a look at. Drew, is there anything that you want people to look at in particular related to the annual report?
Anything in particular? No, I don't think so. I realized the last report and probably ones preceding it were probably a page or less, and so I've gone over that. If there's anything that needs to be minimized, taken out, please let me know. And I haven't seen any of the information that was provided by Terry or the Bobolink project, so I can certainly try to weave that in somehow. It's not a finished document at all. So if anybody has any comments, let me know.
So again, people in the room can't see. Yeah, sorry guys about the tech stuff tonight. But these are the things that Drew included.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Trail planning and public access, invasive species and habitat management, forest management planning, referring to the meetings and decisions with Brandon Benedict, governance, volunteers, and public communication, and partnership with the Catamount Outdoor Family Center. Those were like the buckets.
When does this due? The annual
So-
report's not till March, right?
No, yeah, generally early January. So I think what we can probably do is just do some more work behind the scenes. I can collaborate with Drew. Drew, I uploaded Terry's paragraph in the Nest Watch thing to the agenda page for tonight. I received those recently. So those are on the agenda page. But yeah, we can do a little, I'm happy to work with you on that, just help some editing. And what I think we can do is just make another draft and make sure that there's room for it. Maybe we'll do it first and get it out of the way in January.
Sure. And does this have to be one page? I mean, I've got
That's-
headings and things like that sort of break it down more than the previous annual reports, and that can all be eliminated, of course. But if it doesn't need to, I think it's kind of helpful.
Right. I think it does need to be one page, but I'll confirm. That might not be a hard requirement. It may just have been a trend that people are moving towards one-page reports, but
Okay.
Good, I have to get.
I have to run, but I just want to say on that note that I think the headings are really helpful. I mean, like, I just think if I'm just looking at it right now, it really improves readability.
okay. So,
All right, folks, I gotta go.
Thank you. This is super helpful.
Thank you. See you later. See you next month.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Do your homework.
So we gotta